God-level duplication system. Chapter 52. Challenge. It was so noisy on the field that all the disciples were talking about it with their hearts pounding. After a long while, they finally calmed down. The way they looked at Lin Xuan was completely different. They looked at him with admiration and envy. Lin Xuan once again used his strength to prove his talent. He deserved to be treated like this. They didn't dare to treat Lin Xuan as a new disciple. After all, even the old disciple was far inferior to Lin Xuan. The few old disciples who mocked Lin Xuan earlier lowered their heads in shame. None of them dared to look Lin Xuan in the eyes anymore. They had never thought that Lin Xuan would do what they thought was impossible. They were shocked and ashamed of the same time. They shouldn't underestimate him because he was a new disciple. Chen Yuzi, Zhou Lei, and Guan Yuanchuang looked at Lin Xuan and felt shocked in their hearts. They thought that no matter how talented Lin Xuan was, his cultivation time was too short. He would not be able to threaten them. Therefore, after the competition began, they didn't pay much attention to Lin Xuan. However, they realized that their previous opinions were completely wrong. Lin Xuan's talent had far exceeded their imagination. The so-called number one genius of the outer sect was simply not enough to describe him. If the scene in front of them was real, then Lin Xuan could really threaten their ranking. Lin Xuan was only in the early enlightenment stage a month ago. Now, he was at least a qi gathering stage. Furthermore, his strength had even surpassed the peak of the qi gathering stage. They were extremely shocked. Even Chen Yuzi had a serious expression on his face. If Lin Xuan could clear the puppet tower in less than a minute, he might not even be a match for him. However, even though there was a lot of evidence, he still couldn't believe it if he didn't see it with his own eyes. Furthermore, he had already broken through to the qi transformation stage. His strength had increased several times. More importantly, he still had a trump card. That was the embryonic form of sword intent. Although it was an embryonic form, it was still a concept. A concept is the most basic manifestation of the laws of the world. Once he displayed it, it was as if he possessed the power of the world. His strength would once again increase by a great deal. Even those early qi transformation stage disciples of the inner sect might not be his match. He believed that no matter how strong Lin Xuan's talent was, he would never be his match. The first place in this competition was still his. However, when he thought about how he needed to use his trump card to defeat Lin Xuan, he couldn't help but feel shocked. He estimated that he could only be one step ahead of Lin Xuan in this competition. Soon, Lin Xuan would enter the inner sect as well. He might be able to surpass him by far. On the other side, Grand Elder's eyes fell upon Lin Xuan with a hint of shock. He had seen many geniuses before. However, very few people were as talented as Lin Xuan. In this generation, only Lu Qianye and Xu Anlin had this kind of talent. In fact, Xu Anlin might even be slightly weaker than Lin Xuan. In the sect, Lu Qianye and Xu Anlin were already considered pretty good. Now, Lin Xuan had appeared. This was a pleasant surprise. Lin Xuan, you did well. The Grand Elder smiled. After praising Lin Xuan, he looked around the crowd. He said in a clear voice, since all the dummies in Puppet Tower have been destroyed, the remaining teams won't need to participate in the elimination round anymore. The ones who passed through the 7th group were Lin Xuan and Li Cheng. In the 8th, 9th, and 10th groups, the ones who passed were the top 20 disciples from the previous batch. Of course, this might not be fair. So, later, I will give you a free chance to challenge the top 20. The first round of elimination ended here. The next round was also the elimination round to determine the top 10. Let's go back to the martial arts practice field. Grand Elder waved his hand and asked the deacons to bring the disciples back to the martial arts practice field. Lin Xuan's eyes revealed a smile. He looked at the energy points that kept increasing in the attribute panel and became even more satisfied. I have another 80,000 energy points. Lin Xuan nodded slightly. He was now less than 10 meters away from Grand Elder and Xu Anlin. He had also accumulated some energy points. 30,000 energy points were consumed. Duplication successful. You have obtained Gale Sword Art, rank 6 top grade, great completion. Consumes 30,000 energy points. Duplication successful. You have obtained Gale Phantom Spell, rank 6 top grade, great completion. In a short period of time, he had used up all 80,000 energy points he had obtained. He now had a few treasures that were not of low quality. Lin Xuan nodded his head. After that, he followed the crowd towards the martial arts practice field. Lin Xuan had used all the treasures he had obtained. His strength had increased once again. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to replicate many of the treasures that Grand Elder and Shu Anlin had. In the upcoming competition, he would have to display some of his strength to earn more energy points. Under the leadership of a few deacons, the disciples of the outer sect soon left the puppet tower. On the other hand, Grand Elder and Shu Anlin were still standing beside the pile of remains of the dummies on the ground. Shu Anlin stared at the pile of remains of the dummies with a startled expression. "Can you do that when you were in outer sect?" Grand Elder asked. "No." Shu Anlin came back to his senses, shook his head, and said in shock, "I didn't expect that there would be an extraordinary genius among this batch of new disciples. In the future, it shouldn't be a problem for him to be ranked at the top of the Kangyuan country's potential role." "Yeah, I didn't expect that either." Grand Elder sighed with emotion. "How is it? You didn't come here for nothing, did you?" "Yes." Shu Anlin nodded. "Let's go. There might be a surprise." The two of them left Puppet Tower. Not long after that, Grand Elder Shu Anlin and all the disciples of the outer sect returned to martial arts practice field. Grand Elder and Shu Anlin went to a tall platform at the side. All the disciples were standing around the martial arts practice field, surrounding the three arenas in the center. On the high platform, Grand Elder announced, "The first round of eliminations has ended. The top 20 have been decided." However, due to the destruction of Puppet Tower, the 8th, 9th, and 10th groups were unable to participate in the first round of competition. In order to ensure fairness, you can challenge the top 20 as you wish. If you win, you can replace him in the top 20. Remember, each of you can only challenge once at most. Similarly, each person in the top 20 can only accept one challenge at most. Also, you only have half an hour. Half an hour passed. The top 20 names would be decided. "You can start." After he finished speaking, a commotion broke out in the plaza. A few deacons came over and followed Grand Elder's instructions. They led Chen Yuzi, Zhou Lei, Lin Xuan, and the others to the bottom of the high platform. The rest of the disciples were on the other side of the square. Chen Yuzi, Zhou Lei, Lin Xuan, and 20 other people stood below the high platform. Some of them had calm expressions on their faces, such as Lin Xuan, Chen Yuzi, Zhou Lei, and other top experts of the outer sect. Some of them, who had broken through in the past few months, looked nervous. They glanced at the disciples opposite them, afraid that they would fall out of the top 20. This was the difference. On the other side, the disciples did not choose to challenge immediately. After all, those who could make it into the top 20 were the top experts of the outer sect at the very least. It wasn't easy for them to win. However, the time limit for the challenge was only half an hour. Time passed minute by minute. Soon, someone could no longer hold it in and stood out. "I am Wu Chen. I wish to challenge Zhao Kun." "Sure." A deacon walked out and nodded. He stepped onto the stage and was the judge for the two of them. Soon, the two disciples went onto the stage and started fighting. The result was decided not long after. It was Wu Chen, who initiated the challenge, who won and entered the top 20. This had motivated the other disciples of the outer sect. Immediately, many people began issuing challenges. They began to fight in the three arenas. Unfortunately, those who could enter the top 20 were all quite strong. It wasn't easy for them to succeed. Following that, the disciples who issued challenges were all defeated without any surprises. Only two of them succeeded. The disciples were no longer as excited as before. However, there wasn't much time left. They still went forward to issue challenges one by one. "I am Wang Kui, and I wish to challenge Lin Xuan." A burly disciple stood out and said it in a loud voice. After he finished speaking, everyone on the scene looked shocked and perked up. Lin Xuan had performed very well in the Puppet Tower in the first round. Even the three great experts of outer sect, and even the number 1 genius of outer sect who had broken through to the Qi transformation stage, Chen Yuzi, seemed to be far inferior to him. However, this could only be explained by evidence. None of them had witnessed it with their own eyes. Even though the evidence was conclusive, everyone still had a trace of doubt in their hearts. Finally, someone came to challenge Lin Xuan. The person who dared to challenge must be a top expert in the outer sect. He had reached the peak of the Qi gathering stage. Although they might not be able to see Lin Xuan's full strength, they could still see some clues. Everyone was looking forward to it. Lin Xuan looked surprised. He didn't expect someone to challenge him. However, he could now earn a wave of energy points. After that, he walked out.